Today we are going to learn how to rate changes based on two factors, importance and feasibility. In previous meetings, we spent time assessing the school environment in order to come up with a list of proposed changes that will be meaningful to our school. Soon, we will select the healthy eating changes and physical activity changes we want to have in place by the start of next year. But how will we decide which changes to work on? By rating the proposed changes for importance and feasibility, we will learn which of the changes on our list will have the most impact on our students. We will also learn more about how easy or difficult the changes will be to implement. Thinking about both of these factors will help us select changes that are both things we can accomplish and things that will make a big difference for students at our school. In this video, you will learn what importance and feasibility mean in terms of aim and how to rate your proposed changes in a way that will help you select the right changes for your school. When we rate a change for importance, we are evaluating how much difference making this change will have on the lives of our students. To do this, we consider three factors: how many students the change will affect, how often the change will affect them, and whether or not there is evidence to show that the change will have the desired result. The first thing we want to consider is how many students the change will impact. Will the change impact just a few students or grades, or will it affect all the students in the school? Next, we need to think about how often the change will impact students. For example, a change that will happen only once or twice a year is not nearly as important as a change that will provide opportunities for kids to be physically active or eat healthy foods every day of the school year. Finally, what evidence is there to support this change? Has it been shown to work in other schools? Do we know it will increase healthy eating or physical activity? This is the last criteria that we use to evaluate changes for importance. Here's another thing to keep in mind. When rating changes for importance, we don't mean what's important to me personally. The goal is to be as objective as possible using the three criteria: how many, how often, and is there evidence to support it? Feasibility has a similar rating process to importance, but the three criteria are focused on how easy or difficult the change will be to implement. The first consideration is cost. Is there a cost associated with this change? And if so, can our school afford it? Second, we want to know how much time or energy it will take to put this change in place. Do we have someone who is able and willing to put in the work to make it happen? Finally, how much support does this change have from staff, students, administrators, and parents? And can we get the support we need? Now that you understand what we mean by importance and feasibility, it's time to rate our changes on these criteria. Importance and feasibility are each rated on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being low and 10 being high. The more precise you can be with your ratings, the more helpful the results will be. It also helps to keep in mind that very few changes will score a perfect 10 for importance and feasibility. Let's look at how this works. An item could rate low for importance if it affects only a few students, doesn't happen very often, or because it doesn't show any evidence of increasing physical activity or healthy eating. This kind of change would score closer to 1 on the importance scale. An important change would score closer to 10. This is the kind of change that would affect most students on most days and is one that we know would result in more students eating healthier foods or being physically active. Feasibility follows the same continuum as importance. Changes that rate closer to 1 are those that are very expensive, require too much time and energy to implement, or are not supported by students, staff, and others in the school community. Items that are high for feasibility, such as those that cost very little money, require minimal time to implement, and have lots of support in the community, will rate closer to 10. Each person on the task force will rate the proposed changes individually. Once everyone has done so, the AIM facilitator will collect these scores and calculate the average to come up with a group importance and feasibility rating for each change. Those numbers will be plotted on a graph for our next meeting, where importance will be shown along the x-axis and feasibility will be shown along the y-axis. Depending on which quadrant the change falls into, you will be able to see the relationship between importance and feasibility. For example, dots appearing in the upper right scored high for both importance and feasibility, while dots appearing in the lower left scored low for both. So how will we use these scores? The ratings for importance and feasibility will be very helpful as you prepare to select your final changes. A change that rates low for importance gives us an idea that this change may not be worth the time and energy it would take to implement. But the ratings are not votes in and of themselves. Just because a change rates low for feasibility, for example, doesn't mean that we necessarily want to write it off. After all, it could be a very important change, and with the support of the task force, it could be the perfect time to go for it. Moving ahead, however, we will need to be aware of the kinds of resources we will need to have in place in order to make this change successful. Hopefully now you are ready to get started on rating your list of proposed changes for importance and feasibility. Remember to keep the criteria in mind as you evaluate each change and try to be as objective as possible. Thanks again for your commitment to making your school a healthier place for students.